Some of you know me. I was the former director of Lawrence Community Works. I'm now part of a project here called Quniversity. Some of you have been in the Quniversity space, and I'm very happy that we're part of this tonight, because the idea behind Quniversity is that there's wisdom everywhere, and in a place like Lawrence, that from the outside you get a certain picture. From the inside, you get a very different picture of the city. And this city is saturated with skill and talent and wisdom and aspirational energy and entrepreneurship. And it's fitting that we have this conversation tonight about immigration, because Lawrence is a portal city. It's a place where immigrants come, get their feet underneath them, and join the mainstream economy, or at least that's the way it's supposed to work. And there are so many hardworking, energetic, aspirational, smart, wise people in this city. And Quniversity's job is to bring some of that wisdom and talent out. The Q in Quniversity stands for quality of life. And our view is that we'll all have more quality of life if we share more of our wisdom and our skills and our talents with each other. It's a simple idea, and it's suitable for Lawrence. So I want to welcome you tonight. And the other pleasure I have is to introduce our mayor. There are a lot of people who feel that Lawrence has been on the verge of something really good and really big and really important for a long time. And there are some things that have gotten in the way of that, the economy being one. And I'm one of those people. I feel like Lawrence has been bubbling for quite some time. And the thing that we've needed has been a person, a mayor, with the determination, the character, the smarts, the presence, to bring out all the beautiful energy and skill and talent that we have in the city to make this city competitive in the global economy. And I'm one of the people who thinks that we have that guy. When I first met Danny, I met him a while ago, and I had this idea in my head, and I articulated this to him when he decided to run for mayor. I said, Danny, you're a warrior. And I think Lawrence needs warriors. I think we need warriors because this is a tough world, and this is a tough city, and there's a lot of people who deserve to have a warrior as their leader who's going to fight for this city regionally and in our state and in our country, and we have that guy. So I'm so happy to have a mayor who's a warrior. I'm so happy to know this guy, Danny Rivera, and I'd like to introduce him to you right now, our mayor, Danny Rivera.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome to Lawrence on behalf of my office and the members of the Lawrence City Council. We'd just like to make sure that you're welcomed here, and come back anytime. We have a bunch of good places to see, places to eat. I know Councilor LaPlante is with us, Councilor from District F, joining us. No pressure, right, Bill? Just building it up. But I went to actually Harvard Mayor's Camp, and they teach you a bunch of stuff of how to be a mayor, and you learn from other mayors. But one of the things that one of the economists say that it's crucial for communities is to have a network or a core group of people that are innovating all the time, and they call them these little shops that you should have people innovating. And we were fortunate that we had Bill Traynor back when it was Lawrence Planning Neighborhood Development Corporation, LPNDC, a long time ago. And he drew another group of people from MIT, sorry, Harvard. And we've been fortunate to have this group of women and Bill and the people that now run Lawrence Community Work that are always innovating on how to make our community better. So when I say thank you to Lawrence Community Work and to Bill Traynor University, I really do mean it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you very much for all the work you did today. So again, the History Center along with the city of Lawrence. We're so thrilled to have the Ask Center here to take this panel on, something that's very important to me personally and everyone who has immigrant beginnings, which is most people in our city. I've been saying that Lawrence has an accent and will always have an accent because it used to be Polish and Lithuanian, Irish, and Italian, and today it happens to be Dominican, El Salvadorian, Puerto Rican, and next could be Eastern European or Northern African. And we have a duty to create this continuum where people can come in at any point, get some skills, get a job, get their kids into public education, get those kids taught and into the American dream. And that's what happened with me and my mom. And so when I was 5, my mom came here from the Bronx, where she used to work in sweatshops, to come here and work in these factories and put me through school. So the immigration as a policy is a lot of words, but really its impact is human. And folks really need to take that advice. We don't have the privilege of creating immigration policy at our level, but we do what we can to make sure that people live in our communities, have opportunity. And that just today we had our first brown bag lunch. We had about 35 people talking about ESOL, English as a second language for adults, and how do we build a continuum. And our charge, and what I did today, is charge them to be the best ESOL program in the state. Because if we don't get that right, every time I tell a business we have this great workforce to come to Lawrence because we have this great workforce, the only way we can really leverage that workforce is if we can give them some basic English language skills. So if we don't become the best, we have the most to lose. It's okay if Fitchburg or Holyoke or Boston, if they don't want to be the best, that's okay, because we have to be when we have double-digit unemployment in such a big community. So I want to welcome you. I think this is very important, and WBUR has been great to us, covering our city and its transition, and I want to thank you guys for that. And I think that's enough. Thank you again.
Hear me in the back? Yes? All right. So my name is Asma Khalid. I'm a reporter with WBUR. As the mayor mentioned, we've been in Lawrence quite a bit lately. We decided that, truthfully, many of our listeners live in other parts of Boston, not just Boston itself, but that we weren't really covering some of those communities very well, and particularly Lawrence. We felt that the community had been sort of ill-served by some of the work that we had done, I think, over the years. We just felt like we had not done enough. So I want to say in February, we kicked off a series called Project Lawrence, where every couple of months we're looking at sort of big, in-depth stories in Lawrence. Last month, I think we looked at the school system. Our next big story is trying to look at how do you fix sort of the systemically high unemployment. And I'm really excited to see that so many folks came out today to talk about immigration. And I think that is, to me, a testament of how important the issue of immigration is in our communities. So with that, I will open it up. And I think that the best sort of format that I'd like to start with is for our 4 panelists to introduce themselves and maybe spend about 2 to 3 minutes talking about why you feel Lawrence has become such a hub for immigrants. So Jessica, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm Jess Andors. I'm Executive Director now of Lawrence Community Works, following in the great footsteps of Bill Traynor. And we do a lot of community engagement work and community organizing work as a basis for our work here. But I think one of the Lawrence historically has always been a hub for immigration because it was a site of opportunity, right? It was a place where there were jobs and industry and work. And I actually did my thesis while in grad school about the Dominican immigration here to the city. And it was very interesting uncovering people's personal stories and finding out, why they chose to settle here and why this tiny little town in northern Massachusetts became such a hub for Latino immigration here. And I think, the answers to that are very complicated and to me illustrated such an interesting connection between what goes on globally and economically and what goes on a very molecular and family level. So you know, a lot of Latino families, particularly Puerto Rican families that first came to Lawrence, were actually recruited by farms and industry in the region, and it was a lot of the dyeing industries here who were recruiting cheap labor to kind of ride the decline. And after that, this kind of family and chain migration followed, and people came because there were jobs in the region that they could access. There were jobs that weren't really attractive to folks who had grown up in America and in the city. And then they came following family members. And you know, Lawrence right now is the most heavily Latino city in New England, and it has very quickly become this hub for Latino families. I mean, if you go to tiny little towns in the Dominican Republic, as I had the privilege to do a few years ago, people have heard of Lawrence in those towns thousands of miles away. And Lawrence may be one of 3 cities in the United States that they know, you know, besides New York, right, and Miami, or you know, other parts of Florida. So it's a very interesting, that immigration here is a very interesting phenomenon to me, because I sometimes wonder, even though Lawrence has seen many waves of immigration and continues to see different waves of immigration, whether or not that immigration has perhaps permanently changed the character of the city. I think that's an interesting question.
Great, thank you. So Eliana, go ahead.
My name's Eliana Martinez, and I came to Lawrence when I was 5 with my sister. My mom was already living in the United States, and I think that for us growing up here, really was a matter of access and convenience. We were 3 children in a single parent home, all different ages and different stages of schooling. And everywhere that we went, I think it was easy to feel received by peers that understood the experience we were undergoing of being new in the country, of learning a language. And I still see that as a teacher at the International High School. My students they're teenagers, but they're younger siblings. I also have friends who can relate to their experience. Their parents find solace in the comfort of other immigrant parents. And so I think that the nice thing about being a new person in Lawrence is that the reception really is so well staggered, no matter what your demographic, what your nationality, what your sort of lot or status in terms of class might have been in your own country. People really do find like-minded and like-experienced people. So it's a great place, I think, to have first exposure. You can take the bus places if you don't have a car. You can find translation anywhere. You can seek services in your language. And I think all of that has really lent itself to continued immigration, chain migration, as you mentioned.
My name is Zoila Gomez, and I am an immigration attorney in the city. I represent immigrants, get status, bring their families from overseas, and keep their status, because a lot of people that I represent are on the verge of losing their status for one reason or another. And I think that Lawrence is a safe haven for at least the people that I represent. They represent a community in which they feel they're safe from maybe immigration, and the people who don't have status feel like they're not in a community in which they're going to be persecuted, unless you have a criminal history, of course. but I think that's a good thing. I came here when I was 18. My father sort of grabbed his entire family from the Dominican Republic and brought it here, all at kind of at the same time, from grandparents to aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews. So everybody came sort of at the same time in the 80s, late 80s. So when I came here, to me it was home. I never felt like I was in a strange place, because I saw my grandmother every day, and I shared with the same people that I knew back in the Dominican Republic. So it was very home, and I sort of felt the Dominican Republic was the foreign place for me when I first came.
Well, Sister Eileen, would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So my name is Sister Eileen Burns. I work at Notre Education Center here in the city, and we do ESOL. So I was at the mayor's meeting this afternoon. We were really grateful that he called us all together to look at that. So we do language acquisition. We do It's now no longer called GED, now it's called high school equivalency in Massachusetts. We also do some citizenship work, and we train nurse assistants, certified nurse assistants. So we do a variety of things at the center. And for myself, I was born in South Lawrence. I carry the pattern of most people in that I was born in Lawrence, and then we moved to Methuen. And that's a constant, I'm from the Valley, and I understand that that is the pattern that we have done for generations here. Both my grandmothers are immigrants, one from Scotland, one from Quebec, Canada. And it is part of the fabric of who we are as Laurentians. But I'm proud, I'm from Farley Street in Lawrence when I was.
Great, well,
Yes.
thank you. So I guess what I'm going to do is ask each of you, sort of as a journalist interview format, specific questions, but feel free to jump in if you want to add a comment to anything that anybody else says. So Sister Eileen, I'm going to start with you. Can you give us a sense of how Lawrence has historically served as a gateway for immigrant communities, and perhaps how that face of immigration has also changed over the years?
Sure. So I told you about my grandmothers being immigrants. I'm also part of a Catholic women's group, the Sisters of Notre de Namur. And we actually came to the city when it was 6 years old, and we've had a constant presence in the city. We also were immigrants coming into the city to work with other immigrants. I think the difference in Lawrence's story, the uniqueness of it, is that it was an experiment. We were carved out of farmland, as many people know. So this city was bought by the Lawrence brothers, and unlike Lowell, the first industrial city that was hoping to get the Yankee daughters to come and earn their dowry and go home, in Lawrence, it was built to contain and house as densely as it could as many workers for the mills, to feed the mills. So as we know from our earliest roots as a country, landowners were the only ones who could vote originally. Landowners was always a big part of who we were as Americans. And so this city was created with the inability to own land. We are such a dense city when you think of what our population is and how small we are. So we have been a place where we have been a wonderful receiver for people, kind of incubator for new Americans to come and to move on. So it's so exciting. We're here by the Merrimack River in this mill that was created for a very different purpose and now is housing, and we have the university here. Notre Dame Education Center is at one of the mills also, by the Riverwalk. So this city was created very uniquely, very differently. As a Sister Notre Dame, I've worked in Lynn and Lowell. I say sometimes they're giving me a tour of the L cities in Massachusetts, and Lawrence is very unique. One of the things I have noticed here is that in other cities you would have more mix of income levels, of types of properties, but Lawrence, and I live in Lawrence, we are much more uniform and much more packed together. And so it has had that revolving door effect that people come here, they start out, and then they move to someplace else.
Yeah, that's one thing that you actually mentioned that I really wanted to throw to and ask Eliana about. I know we were speaking earlier and you mentioned that yes, you grew up in Lawrence, you left for a bit, but you came back, which is maybe a different trend than we've been seeing in earlier generations. So can I have you tell me a little bit about that and why you decided to come back?
Yeah, and I've noticed that a lot of people in my generation, I like to call myself sort of the half generation because I came when I was little, so I wasn't born here, but I wasn't really raised there. So there are a lot of people like me who are about my age who feel that they have this affinity that is really worth kind of investing in. And I saw a lot of people a little bit older, a little bit younger than myself, go to college, travel a little bit, try out a job, maybe think about going far, far away because I hate it here. But then something about it really always kind of brought people back. And I see now how, as young professionals, a lot of us are investing in the city in many different ways. In education alone, I can tell you, as a teacher, there's nothing more affirming for me, other than my students doing well, than to see peers of mine that I literally grew up with being my colleagues. That as my colleagues, as parents of other people, young people in the city who are going to be maybe my students at some point, that's really encouraging. And I see them doing marketing, and I see them in all kinds of different professions. And so I think the variety of what they do, but also how much heart they pour into the city itself, is really telling about what happened between K and 12. That we didn't just go and never come back. There's sort of this boomerang effect. So I think now, as a teacher, I'm kind of wondering what was that X factor? What is it that we do maybe it's not even in the school, maybe it's just in the community at large. It's, there's little like barrios, right? There's small communities that spring up here and there where people feel this closeness and a support. And I don't think that happens everywhere. So I do see Lawrence recycling a lot of its young, bright minds, and I think the Greater Lawrence Young Professionals Network is an excellent example of that. And I've met older folks as well who've started similar organizations, Radamus Nova. We just keep people in the loop. We talk to each other, we ask questions, we share experiences, we brainstorm solutions, and that is so invaluable. But I would love to see how, in 10 years, some of our younger folks kind of keep that tradition alive.
Thank you. I'm curious, have you ever spoken about it with some of the other colleagues who did come back and try to figure out what was it that made us come back?
I get different responses kind of based on what realm it was that I knew them in. So, I did track, and so all my friends from track are still around. We're teachers and nurses and all different things. And we say, well, it was the track team, really, like we were a family. And then, there were kids I did drama with, and they were like, it was drama, we were a family. So I still haven't really put my finger on it, but I think a lot of it had to do with the school. Having one central high school where, one public school rather, where most of the kids were going, and now the school is so big. I'm really curious to see how having 6 small academies within that large campus is going to affect that sense of community. Because I think having this big one building there and having everyone in the same place might have changed the way that students related. But we'll see, I think, in time, now that some of our first college graduates will be new Lawrence High School graduates. I want to see what that will look like in the landscape of young professionals in Lawrence.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add something? Go ahead.
I'm not sure that this is fully thought through, but I did want to comment on that because I find it very interesting when thinking about, wondering whether the character of immigration to this city in some ways has shifted because of some of the dynamic that Eliana is describing. And one of the things I'm thinking about is, I was just at this full-day workshop last week for the Working Cities Challenge effort that's going on in the city now. And one of the things that the organizers asked us to do, each of us to do, was to share something about our city that's like a hidden treasure or a secret, something that no one else outside the city really knows about. And some people in other cities were talking about their parks or their bridges or this tourist attraction or that. And I thought, the thing that people don't know about Lawrence, or would maybe be surprised to hear, is that it's actually an amazing place to raise a child. And I'm doing that right now. I live in this city about 8 blocks from here, and I'm raising my son here, and I love it. And part of the reason I love it is because there's such an amazing community and an ethic of like love for children and love for family in this community that, I think is cross-cultural in some ways, but I've certainly felt it more strongly in this city and among the Latino community in this city than I felt it in other areas where I've grown up. And so I wonder if part of that plays a role in the kind of community, in creating the kind of community feeling that draws people back even once they've gone away and then come back again in some ways. I don't know.
Well, I want to also comment, because if you take Sister Eileen's comment regarding the fact that Lawrence used to be this community in which people came and grew up here and went to school and went to college and got an education and said, you know, I have to move someplace else, get a bigger house with a bigger yard and a swimming pool. And I think that's changing, that's shifting. And it may have something to do with the changes society itself is experiencing, or it may have something to do with the fact that I think that there's more of an appreciation for this city. I came to this city when I was 18, and I feel like I've lived here all my adult life, and I have never left because I really care for this community. And I felt that if I left after I got an education, then some of us have to stick around. And I am so proud and so happy to see so many people like Eliana who have come back here, who are contributing to this community, who are working here, teaching our children, and working here every day to make this city better. And I think this, you know, this city is a vibrant community that's going it's just the beginning of a new era for Lawrence, and I'm very excited about it.
And you know, I think we can't underestimate the statistics all across this country that this generation, people your age, Eliana, are really changing the face of things because you're techies, you network, you are committed, you are loyal, and I think there is something really exciting happening here in Lawrence and across the country from your generation. Each generation brings a different gift, but I am very excited about you folks. And I think Lawrence too is, you know, I looked at some statistics today, and of the 116 cities in Lawrence, we are second of the 116 in terms of people under 5 years old. Second on 116 in terms of people under 18 years old. We are a young city. And that might be part of what you're saying, Jess, in terms of the ability to really value our treasure, which is people and the relationships within the city. I think that is such a key for us here in the city.
I want to ask all of you actually a bit, and maybe I'll point it towards one of you about the undocumented population, which I think is something that we've heard so much about in the news. You know, we haven't been able to come to a consensus on the federal level. I know here, even in Massachusetts, there have been a few different pieces of legislation that have been introduced that would deal with the, or offer sort of different incentives to the undocumented population, and they sort of never get through the state legislature. I'm thinking of the driver's license bill, which maybe some of you are familiar with, or the Trust Act. And so, Zoila, maybe I can ask you about, you know, the sense that you feel the undocumented population here in Lawrence has a sense of its rights and responsibilities, you know, or also maybe how do you get a population like that to engage in the democratic process?
I think that in Lawrence we do have people who engage in the democratic process even when they aren't necessarily able to vote because they feel that it is important to be part of the process. But I think it's very important that people are well informed as to who has the right to vote, who doesn't have the right to vote, and what is the limitations that you have in your participation. So I believe this community is very participant, and I don't think I'm the only person to have that opinion. There's a large legal permanent resident population in Lawrence because mainly Dominicans came to the United States as documented, and they brought their families to the United States, and they were able to get documented early on when they came. The people that came in my father's generation in the 60s and the 70s, they were able to get to get legal papers to be in the United States. But then you have other communities who are largely undocumented, like, for example, the Guatemalans and the Salvadorians are largely undocumented. So the Dominicans is probably the most actively participant community, even when they do not have United States citizenship. They do hold signs and they make phone calls and they are out there making sure that the candidate that they prefer does make it. So it's a very active community when it comes to participating.
And I think we've had a lot of reactionary policies that have around immigration that have occurred over the last few decades that were not, again, part of the American story. They are not part of the American values. And they really, these policies, by forcing people into the shadows, They have really, depressed wages. People are working under the table. It's not healthy for any of us. We really need to fix our very broken immigration policies, because that's what they are, is policies, and they can be changed. But it's such an important issue for us, I believe.
I think that what's happening in Washington is very sad, because this sort of passing the bucket and this what's happening between Democrats and Republicans is just very sad. That it's the blame game that's going on, and we just have to be very mindful of that. And if we do, this hurts families in general. This hurts the fact that there's no immigration reform happening. You mentioned the license, people being able to have a driver's license. This affects us all. When somebody is driving a car without a license and they're not able to have insurance and they get into an accident with someone else, that affects our community in general. So I think it's important for us to understand the magnitude that it has in our communities when we don't think of policies that are good for everyone that could be affected at the end. And I think having a driver's license for somebody who's undocumented will fix some of the issues that they're having. And in the meantime, there's a lot that the states can do, because the federal government is not really moving forward with comprehensive immigration reform.
Can I ask, in the city of Lawrence then, one of the other pieces of legislation that's come up time and again in the Massachusetts State House is this idea of a trust act, that people don't trust the law enforcement, and then part of that is because of the federal Secure Communities program. I'm wondering how you all feel that the Lawrence immigrant community, maybe we can speak specifically about the undocumented population, feels interacting with the police or interacting with, let's say the police force here in the city.
Well, I think that in Lawrence, there's a lot to be implemented when it comes to the way the police officers deal with the population in general. I don't think it's necessarily only the immigrant population, but the citizenship in general. I believe that there's this level of, there's the lack of trust between citizens in general and the police. Just because I believe that the police force in Lawrence needs to be better trained on how to deal with an immigrant population that may not know the rights and responsibilities when they first come here, and then the way that they're treated by the police when they may get in trouble for something that they might not know, creates that lack of trust towards police officer. I have people who come to my office and have a few sheets of records for disturbing the peace, open container, for stupid little things that if they would have known that it was wrong, they would have not done it. For maybe speaking too loud when the police was coming around and trying to disperse a crowd. So I believe that there's a lot of training that needs to happen with especially the Lawrence Police Department on how to treat and how to deal with some of the issues regarding criminality and new immigrants.
Go ahead.
I would also say that, to me, this is one of the things that speaks to the need for different strategies around civic engagement in not just in this city, but in cities like this across the country. And I know, part of the work that Lawrence Community Works does is we do a lot of work training neighbors, residents. It doesn't matter if you're documented, undocumented, citizen, not citizen, like none of that even comes into play. Just training them in how to meet their neighbors, have conversations with their neighbors, participate in larger conversations that are happening in the city, whether that's around the city budget or economic development issues or public safety or trash. And there's so many ways that people can participate and give their strengths back to a community without, before they even might become citizens or can vote or participate in those ways. And those are ways that a community can tap into the strengths and assets that an immigrant population has. So, for instance, if one of the things that you're doing in a neighborhood is having meetings fairly regularly that are open, that are talking about public safety issues in that community, and police are coming to them and neighbors are coming to them, and no one's asking in that meeting like whether you're a citizen or a resident or what it is, but you're focused together on a common goal, which is how do we make this place safer, then you're going to get a lot further down the road than focusing on some of these other issues. So I do feel like there is a way to approach some of these conversations that is an asset-based approach rather than a fear-based approach. And I feel like there's some ways in which Lawrence has some lessons and models that could be applied elsewhere in that area.
Thank you. I want to shift gears a little bit, but also maybe touch on that idea of civic engagement at the high school. And Eliana, I know you're teaching at a school within the larger high school that deals exclusively or primarily with English language learners. Can you sort of tell me what some of the difficulties you feel you've hit in terms of civic engagement, assimilation with that newcomer population?
Well, I think in terms of civic engagement, on a level that is really totally divorced of their legal status or maybe law enforcement, is I do see my students and their families and friends. So there are certain subgroups of immigrants that use our public spaces in an excellent way. They are very resourceful. They're out and about. As soon as the snow thaws, they're playing soccer. They're out with their small children, and I love to see that because I see them embracing their place. And I think that regardless of, and this may be a skewed perception of mine, but I think that regardless of maybe some of their latent fears about who knows my status and who doesn't, they're definitely making the best of it. And it's great to see the work ethic in the classroom that those kids bring back. Some of my students are, for the most part, the students are so driven. They know what it cost their parents to get them here. Some of them really literally risk their lives. I hear stories sometimes almost reluctantly about crossing the border. I've had students cross the border as minors without parents, without a single relative. They end up in Arizona. They're kind of detained a little bit there. They're sent to their nearest relative, maybe in Missouri, God knows where. Like, they've been to states that I wouldn't expect them to have been, and then they end up here. And sometimes, unfortunately for some of them, they end up in foster care, and they may have gone to, maybe have been in Lynn first, and then they come to Lawrence. So, because of the long route that they take to get to where we are, we seldom get them like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as, you would think like they're just excited to be here. They are, but they're also so scared and so hurt that it takes us a long time to break down those barriers to trust and to allow them to feel comfortable enough sharing their experiences, sharing their fears and their hopes. And a lot of them really just, they want to get whatever they can, because some of them, once they become adults, they stop coming to school. And that is definitely, I get chills just thinking about it. I've had students stop coming and I say, where's so-and-so? And kids will say, well, his immigration lawyer told him not to come anymore because it's too dangerous. And I would love to live in a place where that never happens to the kinds of kids that it's happening to. But they're hanging on, they're giving it their all, and they love each other. They're so caring. Really, sometimes the kids who have the least are giving the most. So I think that civically, they're engaging in every way that they can, all the time, as long as they feel that they're allowed to.
Were you going to add something?
Well, I want to add that it's too sad that they do stop going to school, and it's the opposite. It really helps them to stay in school. It really helps them if they have any chance of staying in the United States. Staying in school is actually better for them. So I don't know why an immigration lawyer will ever tell them not to keep going to school. I think that whoever that is, it should be disbarred. But it is, they come here with having experienced so much already, especially the young people. And I can tell you the difference, for example, between two of the largest populations that I served, the Lawrence community of immigrants and Manchester, New Hampshire. And it's so different. You have completely two different worlds. You have people in Manchester, New Hampshire who are afraid to walk around, who are afraid that they're going to be placed in immigration proceedings because they're of color, because they're going to be targeted as being an undocumented alien, and they're very cautious. They don't. There are a lot of people that I represent from Manchester are people who are stopped while driving without a license, and they're stopped without having violated the law at all, just because they're of color. So it's very different. It's very different. I never ever get somebody from Lawrence saying I was stopped because I was driving without a license, and immigration was called on me. That doesn't happen in this community. So the difference between those two large community of immigrants that I represent, and how this is more of a safer place for them to be, because they don't have to deal with those profiling, racial profiling.
I think quite a few of you have mentioned sort of different populations of immigrants in some of our conversations, and I'm wondering, maybe Sister Eileen, you can start by addressing whether you've seen any tensions between different immigrant groups, because while I think you mentioned that many of the immigrants are Dominican, you're sort of seeing different waves of different groups, you're also seeing documented and undocumented. Can you speak to that?
Well, I taught here at St. Mary's Grammar School in the 1980s, and I found more tension in the city at that time than I'm experiencing now. I think that at our center, at least, people really, we welcome that diversity. I think that some sense I have that the city is so highly one language it's been very different than my experience in other cities in Massachusetts, because when there are several languages, people really make an effort to learn English as another way to communicate, and that hasn't been such a high need in Lawrence in the past, and I think in some ways it is also hurt the community, because there has been that comfort, and it hasn't given them the edge to try to be more bilingual. I think that in general I have not seen that tension between ethnic groups as strongly as I did
in an earlier time.
20 years ago, right, in the city. I don't know how, well, you don't have that history of 20 years ago, but...
well, you were a young one.
I was around 25 years ago, and I agree. Yes. I agree 100% with you that I believe that there's less tension now than it was back when I came 25 years ago, 26 years ago. So I think that, you've made a very interesting point, the fact that the community is so one language, you know what I mean? Everybody can communicate in Spanish. Everywhere you go, you can speak your own language and not have the need to speak English. And I think that in some sense, I agree with you that it has hurt the community of immigrants that come and do not feel the need to speak or learn the language. And I think that that's something that we have to make an effort to educate and turn around our community as to the importance of learning English, because you may be safe and have all the resources that you need in this community, but there's so much more out there. You know what I mean? You want to experience the world. And if you don't learn the language, then you will not be able to experience that world. And that is very, very true.
And we have Brazilians, but they pretty much can communicate with Spanish speakers. But we have Haitians that are really feeling isolated at times, and we have an increasing in our place Arabic-speaking community. So there are other languages, but it is so one-focused sometimes that is difficult for the diversity we have among us in terms of immigrants.
Do you
The
see that as
Vietnamese, the Chinese.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a further complication of that's very interesting to me is that when people come to this country, they bring their own cultural traditions and history with them, right? So in the Dominican Republic, for example, you have a very rich history and culture of political activism, right? Yes. And a lot of people remain active in Dominican politics even after they come to Lawrence, right? And there's Dominican candidates who come through the city campaigning and so on. But in maybe a country like Guatemala or El Salvador, where there's been a long history of bloody civil war in many cases, People are coming who have a very different experience of political life and civic life and a different orientation towards that. And that's going to be true in a different way of people who are coming from Arabic-speaking countries or from Haiti or from other places. So I do think that there is a challenge even among the Spanish-speaking community in integrating different models of civic engagement and building barriers across cultures, because just because people all speak the same language doesn't mean that they have the same cultural understandings and traditions. So.
And I was just going to ask at the high school level as well, because you are dealing with a population that doesn't necessarily know English as a first language. Are you seeing new waves of immigrants coming in from other non-Spanish speaking countries?
We've had an increasing incidence of students from Haiti, from the Congo. We have several families from Vietnam, also Arabic-speaking families, 2 students from Syria. So and those low-incidence students do, unsurprisingly, tend to be the ones who feel the most pressure to learn English more quickly. But they learn it. They also learn Spanish, and they find that very funny.
They do.
So, we're like manufacturing these little polyglots, and then, but it's really it's. I think it gives the other students a sense of urgency. Like, well, there's a reason they're learning a little faster than I am, and I think our kids do. Although they embrace, like I said, they embrace the city, they do have this sort of yearning to see more and to get out. So I think sometimes, and I mentioned this before when we spoke earlier, that I think we undervalue the unspoken, the implicit messages that our students are getting from their families. Their families may not be their biggest cheerleaders in visible ways at games or at parent nights, but I think our students see how their parents struggle. And they see how difficult it is not to be able to communicate with your doctor, with someone at the bank, with someone at a store. Whatever it is, in different ways, I think our students are very perceptive. They know the struggle of not speaking English, and they internalize that. And I think that really drives them to give it a little bit more and to push themselves to learn English, even when everyone around them is speaking Spanish, which is comfortable. And we really support that. We encourage students to kind of have that attitude about it, to embrace their native language as beautiful and rich and as a tool. And I always tell them, it's my first language, and it helped me learn other languages. And I think that they also see how their culture is an asset a lot of the time. So as long as I think we keep the message positive, and I think letting them see that it's more about value added than about replacement, I think that tends to be a really rich experience for them. But we have about 14, 15 countries right now represented at the International High School.
I always wondered whether if the acquisition of other languages were as valued in our educational system as the acquisition of English for immigrants, whether we might not all be better off, right? I mean, there are families on the Upper East Side of Manhattan that are paying a lot of money for their children to learn Mandarin or Spanish or other languages like that. And I think it would be a lovely systemic change in our whole culture if true bilingualism or trilingualism or being a polyglot, as Eliana said, is valued for everybody. So it's both English language acquisition for immigrants as extremely important, but also other language acquisition for the rest of us too.
So I want to leave enough time for questions. So I have one final question that I'll ask. If there aren't questions, then I can continue because I have lots more. But my final question, let's call it the glass half full or the glass half empty question. So I'll let you choose which way you want to address this. I wanted to ask where you think Lawrence has succeeded in crafting innovative ideas that really work on integrating a diverse immigrant population. The flip side to that question is, what do you feel is the big unfinished challenge for Lawrence? I'll let you pick which question you want to answer. So let's start with you, Sister Eileen.
The unfinished question for Lawrence.
Or you can choose the optimistic one to answer.
No. I think that we're not going to finish. I think, as I said, I think Lawrence is a unique place, and we're always going to have questions. I think we're more an innovation place, a creativity place. So I hope we never stop asking all the questions and trying to innovate. I don't think there's a point where we're going to just settle. I think we're going to continue to be a diverse, creative, unique place, and I think that is great news.
Well, I think that Lawrence is a continuously changing immigrant population. We have young people coming to our city and older people coming to our cities from other countries. And because it's a population that's always growing, it's always changing, with new immigrants coming in, you always have so much flavor in it, because you have, I deal with immigrants, for example, who come from different parts of Latin America and the Dominican Republic, who came here when they were 60, and they're not gonna learn English. They're not going to learn English. I'm too old for that. That's what they tell me. But doesn't mean that they're not integrating in this community, and they feel that there are resources here in this community for them. And for example, I remember having a conversation with the superintendent, Jeff Riley, and I said, listen, you came to this community as the new person. The first thing you need to understand is how unique this community is. And you can compare it to Andover when it comes to educating this city. You can compare it to any of the surrounding cities, because it's very unique. You have a very diverse population of people who are coming and continuously immigrating, new immigrants coming into the city. And you need to figure out how to educate that community of new immigrants and educate a community of people who have been here already and who are used to this system of learning. So it's a community that's always going to be changing, and I hope that in that changing, we do grow in other areas and become a better city.
I also want to tackle this idea of what the biggest, say, challenge is, or where you think that the city's done well.
Well, I'm not sure which question I'm answering. I'm just going to say something. Pick. So I think that one of the most powerful things, as some of you have alluded to, is that there really are a lot of people who are from here and may have other experiences, and they hear things like maybe what a magazine that shall remain nameless said about the city, right? It was an insult. It was like just a slap in the face. And I think that for a lot of us, it's actually the fact that there is such a negative perception of a place we hold so dear that really kind of gets us going. We say like, oh, no, wait a minute. That's not true. That's not where I grew up. That's not where I'm from. There's more to it than that. And maybe that's all you see because that's all you're looking for. But I think that one of the challenges may be, what do we do with all these people that want to fix things, that want to add their 2 cents, to maybe turn things around? There are so many of us here. I think sometimes it's almost like we don't know what to do with all this human capital we've got. So that may be the biggest challenge, is people want to help. What do they help with?
I'm not sure I can add much more to that, but I think the city has done a pretty interesting and amazing job over the last, I'll say 15 or 20 years in building new habits of civic engagement and participation. And of course, I think that partly because of the work that Lawrence Community Works has done, but I think that also because of the work that a lot of other groups have done and are doing, starting maybe with Isabel Melendez and all the voter registration and activation and mobilization that she's done over her lifetime, and most recently with GLIPN and the Greater Lawrence Young Professionals Network, and all the work that they're doing to specifically help folks in that 20 and 30-something category who grew up here, the Elianas of the world, right, to reinvest and find pathways for that energy. So I think that has been an amazing accomplishment. I do think that probably our crucial challenge right now, but the challenge that I'm most excited about, is our public education system and making that into a functioning system that really helps Lawrence play that integrative function in the world and helps families get their real start here.
I'd like to just add one more thing, that I do think that education is a key it's a tool to unlock so much potential for people. And I do think that is one of our greatest challenges as a city. So I was talking about out of 116 cities, we rank 116 out of 116 in terms of the amount of adults over 25 who have a high school diploma or equivalency. So we do need that liberation that education gives, and that empowerment, and then that unleashes a lot of the energy too, and a lot of the ability to focus and know how to work together to change things. for the better.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think I'll throw it to Archon for a few sort of closing thoughts. Maybe you could summarize sort of what we've heard today.
Yeah, so I'll stand up here because so you can hear me because I don't have a mic on. But my name's Archon Fung, and I teach at the Kennedy School, and I'm here on behalf of my colleagues at the Ash Center of the Harvard Kennedy School, and we're co-sponsoring this event with the partners up here on the panel. And our interest in this is we're holding a series of discussions about challenges to American democracy and how to meet those challenges. And we're talking about challenges like inequality and like technology and all sorts of things. But one of the themes that we're beginning to address is the theme of immigration. And we're trying to learn both about the challenges and how communities are dealing with them. And part of the learning is learning from scholars, from social scientists and other folks. But part of the learning is also by having community conversations like this one. And so we thought kind of no better place to go than Lawrence to kind of participate in and listen to a conversation about how you all have dealt with the challenges and opportunities posed by changing populations. And the conversation we've just had shows that that was a very good choice for us. So you may not know it, but many people who look at American community and American democracy think that immigration and diversity itself is just a huge showstopper for trust and democracy. And a lot of people argue that the more diverse a place is, the tougher it's going to be there. The less people are going to trust each other, the less well government's going to work. It's just going to present huge challenges, right? But the conversation tonight shows how your community has risen to the challenge, indeed not seen it so much as a challenge, but as an opportunity and as a huge strength, the diversity of your community. And so, people on the panel have talked about Lawrence for at least since Lawrence has existed as a place of continuous and chain immigration. And that's quite an image, because how do you build community in a place where people are constantly changing? And so that's a really interesting kind of thing to talk about. And I was struck in the conversation by the accomplishments that a bunch of people on the panel have talked about for Lawrence. And some of them are intangible, but that doesn't make them less important. So some of the accomplishments are a feeling of belonging, almost since you got here, a couple of people said, right? And then Eliana said that many people, and you others agreed with her, regard Lawrence now as a place to come back to, not just a place to be from, which is incredible. And Jessica remarked on a little-known fact about Lawrence: it's a great place to raise a family. And then also a thing that I didn't know, that compared to other places in other towns in Massachusetts and New England, it may be a safer place, a more secure place to be undocumented, comparatively speaking, which is quite an accomplishment. And then the accomplishment of harmony between different kinds of people. I think everybody agreed that the group tensions are much less than they were just even 10 or 20 years ago, which is quite an accomplishment. When we began the series, and we're thinking about what to look for in communities and thinking about how they've dealt with the challenge of immigration, we're a policy school, so we thought we'd look for policies that people had come up with. But what I take away from this conversation is that maybe that's not the right place to look. That maybe the right place to look is to process and how people deal with challenges that are always changing and always new. And Lawrence seems to be a place that is relying on process and innovation all the time, from habits of organization and civic work captured in Lawrence Community Works and other organizations, to the continuing relatively new work of the Lawrence Young Professionals and so on. But it seems to be much more about kind of keeping your shoulder to the grindstone, as it were, and pushing forward with dealing with all sorts of challenges rather than some kind of signature policy that's easier to write about, like a driver's license law or undocumented parents being able to vote in school board elections, which are a couple of the policies that people point to from other places. A fourth kind of theme that jumps out from this conversation for me is the importance of understanding and expanding civic engagement and political participation, and to have a broad sense of what that is, right? I mean, ordinarily we think of people being able to participate in the process only if they're citizens, and that's because we think of participation as voting, as casting your vote at the ballot box. But of course, participation is much more broad than that. Participation happens when you engage with your school superintendent, or even with your teacher, or social service worker, or lobby somebody on city council, whether it be for a vote or not, or hold up a sign, or make a call, or write something, or even say something. I was reading a great book by Parker Palmer on The Heart of Democracy is the title of the book. And his view is that one of the most important acts of democracy is these days that's very hard to accomplish is just being with people who aren't like you, right? I mean, in this privatized age where, we rely on our devices to watch things, and even when we're in very public places, we behave in very private ways, it's coming out to things like this where you encounter folks that you wouldn't encounter around the kitchen table or just at your job or among people you know. And that is something, that kind of engagement and exposure is something that you folks in Lawrence seem to have achieved very, very well. Now, looking forward, and maybe I'll just end on a couple of thoughts before opening it up for questions and a bigger discussion. One thing that occurred to me in talking to Bill Traynor before the event and in listening to the discussion here is that it's very easy for any of us to think very locally, to think that the problems we have are local problems and to solve them locally. But of course, that's never true. It's important to act at the local level, but it's also important to think and try to act a little bit on the regional level of Greater Boston, at the state level of Massachusetts, and even at the federal level. I mean, even since the beginning, Lawrence is the home of the Industrial Revolution, and it wouldn't exist were it not for all those global forces out there, for bigger markets, for manufactured goods, suppliers of raw materials to Lawrence. So from the very beginning, Lawrence has been embedded in a system and dynamics that are much larger than Lawrence, and that's no less true now. And so one way to think about that, this is kind of Bill's idea from the beginning, is, if as is definitely true, Lawrence is a gateway city, then the success of other cities in the greater Boston area and beyond, to which those places go, right, to which people from Lawrence go, those who don't return to Lawrence, and not all of them will, the success of those places depend on how accomplished and prepared people who leave Lawrence are. And so to the extent that Lawrence is able to better prepare and capacitate those people, all of Massachusetts benefits. And all of Massachusetts should recognize that and see Lawrence as part of a bigger system, a bigger whole, which is Greater Boston and Eastern Massachusetts, right? And then finally, I was struck by how much Lawrence has to offer other places, other gateway cities who are dealing with some similar challenges, certainly some different ones, but then also how Lawrence might learn a few things by looking outside at how some of those places have dealt with some challenges that Lawrence faces, although Lawrence no doubt faces them in a very distinctive way. And so I know that you guys are already doing a lot of this, but I was just wondering about the potential for even greater learning about improving your ability to innovate and deal with the challenges that come up by inviting other people to look at you and looking even more at other places. So just on the policing issue that came up, just because of research that I've been involved in, I happen to know about other models of policing and community police relationships that create a greater level of trust. And I'm sure there are other similar innovations that are worth at least considering in domains like education and perhaps even organizing. But those were some of the striking things that occurred to me that jumped up in this incredible conversation. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to open it up to questions. We don't have too much time for questions. So what I would like to do is I'll take a couple questions at a time, and that way we can have the panelists address sort of the themes that might pop up from a few different people's questions. And then lastly, we'll have time after the panel if you want to speak to anyone and make comments. So if I can just please keep everyone on message, not to give statements, but please do ask questions because we have such a limited time. So anyone? Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for...
Oh, we have a mic. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Unlay. Hi, my name is Unlay. I'm from the Mayor's Office of New Bostonians. So I want to thank the panelists for speaking. My question is about how to civically engage immigrants from cultures that traditionally don't get civically engaged or politically engaged. Have you done any work in that direction, and what does that look like?
Okay. I'll take just another question or two, and then we'll address that. Anyone else? Anyone else? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Share your interest in the appearance converging your diversity society, come true your American dream in Lawrence. My question is, when you recall your home country or home land, how can you promote your home country or homeland prosperity, common or regional dream?
Did everyone understand that? Yeah, your home country. Yeah. Does anyone else have another question, or why don't we can take these two? Go ahead. Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, Myra Ortiz, Lawrence School Committee. My question is, you brought up the statistics as far as the population that we have in Lawrence is predominantly our youth. How would you answer a child when you hear them say, well, what do you expect? It's Lawrence.
Are you speaking about a negative thing that happens in the city, or? That's
the statement. Because from our panel and from people here, we're creating an enlightenment, a conversation, but without going on, how is this message trickling down to the greater population of our city if the theme that we hear in our youth is, what do you expect? It's Lawrence.
Okay. And just to make sure I understand what you're saying, I guess you're implying that there's a sort of pessimism about. Correct. Got it. Okay. All right. And would anyone like to start? And maybe if we can all sort of encapsulate the different questions.
I think I'd like to start with the first question that went to the, how do you engage people in civic engagement when they may come from communities that they are sort of anti-government or participation in government. I have, one of the communities that you mentioned was the Guatemalan community, and how they may come from a background that it's more, I don't want to participate, I don't want anything to do. I have dealt with the Guatemalan community for quite some time now, about 14 years, and it's a slower process for them to start getting engaged. But I think that once they begin to trust a community, to trust the people that they interact with, you can get them to be more engaged. So I think it's more, you have to get people to talk, to communicate, to get them to understand how the system works, to start trusting the system here in the United States, and slowly they become to get more engaged. So I think it's from our part, the people that are trying to get a community engaged, is getting to know the community. And why is it harder for them to trust government, or to trust institutions, or to how to go about getting resources or getting involved on how to get resources. So it's getting to know the community and knowing how to tackle their challenges.
Yeah, I would speak a little bit to that question. I think that it is partly a question of time, and I don't think it's a question that we have by any means fully answered. But I would say that perhaps one strategy that I feel like has worked for us in the past is use their children. And that, I can just remember when I first started organizing in Lawrence, one of the first projects that we did was a summer program in one of Lawrence's poorest neighborhoods. And when we first started doing it, we were trying to get parents to come along as chaperones on a field trip that we were taking kids on. And we had, registered everyone and gone to their houses and gotten parental permission and signed people up. But only one parent showed up to actually chaperone on the field trip. So we had to recruit the bus driver as an additional chaperone. And so that we were actually at the legal limit or legal floor. And but what started to happen, and I think this speaks to what Zoila said, is that it was a relationship building process. And over the course of the summer, as more parents got to know us and we were in their homes talking with them about their children and showing up every day or every week to take them on field trips or have baseball games and arts activities with them. By the end of the summer, we had 25 parents come as chaperones on our last field trip, and it was a process, but it was a conversation, and it was many conversations actually. And I think that is part of this whole process, that some of it is putting aside preconceptions about people and meeting them where they're at and figuring out ways that you are, I guess, accessing their own strengths and their aspirations, because every single one of those parents cared tremendously about their kids and wanted their kids to do well, and that was a way in to unlocking some of their own participation and involvement in the organization.
I agree. I haven't had as much experience here in Lawrence as, say, Lowell and Lynn. I worked a lot with the Cambodian community, and I think it also depends on the story and the history, the sharing, the amount of trauma that has happened, on how much people can really trust others. I remember in Lowell trying to get a community organizer, and no one wanted to be organized because they were really in that trauma and recuperating. I think that is true that there are strategies like ways working with folks, children of adults, and that does bring out that trust. But it is something that we can't say, people aren't trusting. We need to say, how can we work to earn trust? I think it's an attitude that we bring that makes a difference in terms of that. And I suppose that attitude, that's the same as the third question, of children saying, well, what do you expect? It's Lawrence. I think we need to continue to bring that positive energy. And people are so good at heart. People want goodness. And I think when we can reframe things so that people are able to find that, it's totally different. Because there is, so for many teenagers, there's that phase when things aren't, nothing is going to be totally praised, but there also is that goodness that we just need to figure out how to draw out and make an environment where that is able to come forth in that positive energy, I think.
Any other thoughts on that?
And I think you're always going to have some negativity, either coming from young or old people, older people, more experienced, and from younger people. And I think when you confront that negativity, try to change the conversation into something positive, and don't let it just sit there in the negative stage, because you are going to have kids who are very negative about Lawrence because it's what they've experienced or what they've heard from others. But you have that opportunity when you do confront that negativity to change that conversation and to change how they feel about Lawrence, and try to get them themselves to, maybe by asking questions, acknowledge something positive that they can see in their own communities. And in the high school, for example, there's a great things happening in this community. And I was talking earlier about us maybe having a calendar of events, because there are lots of good things happening in the city that we can get kids or people of all ages involved and see all the good things that are happening in this community and not just the negative stuff.
Yeah, I think if the question unsettles you, if that comment from one of your kids is really disturbing for you, I think it relates to what Jess was saying earlier about raising a kid here. Raising a child in anywhere requires that you also help that child to engage with the community. And you know, your child won't turn out well just by dint of geography. Like, you really have to say, hey, let's go check out this In the Heights play. I heard it's really good, and it's high school students doing amazing things. Let's go to a basketball tournament. Our athletes are really talented. They're hardworking. Let's go see
Eliana dancing in this awesome event. She participated in.
Let's go see teachers dancing. Or you know, the Lawrence Community Works last year. I was really fortunate to be part of the community education circles, where I was actually hosting my own students and their parents in my house, having dinner, having a conversation about education and their expectations of me and mine of them, and so on. And I think that there are things happening in the city in small pockets. You've got to look for them. They're really not going to come to you, and that's tough. I think that's why you know, not everyone wants to raise their child here. You really got to make sure you're intentional about showing your kids what's special about this place. But I would love to hear your kid give someone else a hard time when they hear someone say that, because you know it's coming from adults from outside. It may be even coming from their teachers. It's coming from so many different places. Media perception. They're seeing it on television, maybe in a paper. So your child wasn't born thinking that Lawrence stinks. So someone is helping them build that image, and it's wrong. So I think if it gets you as worked up as I am, make sure that you are raising children that can say, what do you mean by that? So ask them that question first, and then they'll ask when they're older.
Archon, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just by way of building some regional connections, one of the most exciting things in youth civic engagement that I've run across is Boston is just starting a youth participatory budgeting effort in which they've allocated $1 million, and young people get to decide what to spend that money on. And so they're going to propose projects to each other, and they're going to vote at the beginning of the summer. And that's where who knows how it's going to work out, but you know, in some of the early interviews, the young people just can't believe it's real, you know, that someone would trust them with real money.
Right. Yeah.
I think one of the things that helped me a lot too is I think we need to build bridges. We can't be a silo here in Lawrence. And one of the things that helped me a lot when I was coming back into the city was to be part of the Sandbox Leadership Institute, and getting a diverse group of people to look at Lawrence and Lowell and what's good about it. It's now continuing. Thank you so much, under the Mill City Leadership Institute. But Sandbox is gonna all kinds of innovative, creative things that have happened because of Sandbox that's going on. I think things like Jericho Road, that is so unique. I've never experienced a group like it. So it's a nonprofit in Lawrence that its whole mission is to help other nonprofits. So they get people to come in to us as nonprofits, do things we could never afford to do, give us some ad hoc projects. And that is also building bridges, because people are from Lawrence that are part of Jericho Road. There are people from surrounding communities coming in, seeing a different face on us, being positive about what they're seeing, being excited about it. So I think all these bridge building, I mean, that's what we do in Lawrence, right? We can't get from one side to the other in Lawrence without a bridge. And these bridges are so important. We need to figure out how to keep bridging to the other communities around us as well. So those are things that have helped me as well.
We are at the end, but I was going to ask if anyone has any final questions, because I'm so sorry we didn't leave that much time for questions. So if anyone has a question or two, we are happy to take those. In the back, yes. And then we'll come. Anyone else? We have a mic.
Hi, my name is Quinn Gunnell. I'm a teacher at Lawrence High School. I'm also one of the co-founders for the Greater Lawrence Young Professionals Network. Thank you all for coming. My question has to do with the education system. And Eliana, don't answer this question. So we have been categorized as chronically underperforming based on a standardized test that is given to students all across the state. And we've just listened for over an hour about all the things that are happening in Lawrence, what makes us so different and rich. But the fact of the matter is that we have this influx of immigration, that's causing, all kinds of, it's an added challenge in the schools. So my question is, how do you feel, for all the panelists, whoever feels most comfortable, how do you feel about this practice of comparing student population in a city like Lawrence to more affluent communities based on a standardized test that students that are coming from other countries are not prepared to take?
That's a good question. I saw a couple other hands, so we're going to loop in questions again. In the front, go ahead.
So,
I think they're bringing a microphone. One moment.
The 2012 census says that in the city of Lawrence, there is 37% of our population is foreign-born as compared to 15% statewide. So the question is assimilation. Are we succeeding in the city with assimilation? And if not, what can we do to make that better?
Also a good question. I saw one other hand, I think. We'll take it right there. Yeah. Third row? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mark Cutler. I teach at Phillips Academy. I had students out in the city the other day, out in North Common. Their mission was to ask people at large, just shop owners, people they met on the street, how they see the city changing, how they see the city of Lawrence changing. One of the most profound statements I think they got at City Hall from one of the people who works there, not the mayor, who talked about the difference in the language that we use at our school and other places of higher education in Lawrence at the end of high school. At Lawrence, they call it graduation. At a place like Phillips Academy or another place, they call it commencement. It's a really profound difference when you think about the semantics of that. And the statement was that we have to change the way people talk about the end of high school in Lawrence. And how do you do that? What's the way to capture that and inspire the students to think about the end of high school as commencement, beginning something, rather than ending something?
I think that's a great question. I saw one other hand, and we'll take that one other final, right here.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm actually going to end this on a completely different tact. I'm actually a business school student, and I think we talk a lot about integrating into the ecosystem of community, and the one person or group we haven't really talked about are employers. And I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on the role employers have played in helping improve integration, either civic, political life, and any role the private sector can play in this.
Great. Anyone want to start on any of those questions?
Well, I'm going to start with Gwen's question in the back regarding the issue of standardized testing and how that has actually hurt Lawrence because of how the numbers play out and the fact that we have an ever-changing immigrant population of kids coming from outside, from other countries to our school system, and how we are sort of comparing this community to other communities that are very different. So I think it's tragic that it is what it is what we deal with, in especially in Massachusetts with MCAS and the requirements, and how I don't think that is necessarily a module that should be implemented in a city like this that has the challenge of an ever-changing population and new immigrants coming into our communities. But I don't know what the solution is, Gwen, so.
Yeah, that's what I was going to actually ask.
I just think it's a problem, but I don't believe that there is a solution for it. And I don't think anybody has the magic wand to fix it or to change it. I think we're just going to have to deal with that issue in a way that we do not judge our public education system by the numbers because it's very unique.
I think too that we have to acknowledge that there's lots of different educational systems, and one isn't necessarily better than another, but they work for the environment you're in. So a lot of our people are coming from very agrarian areas that have a very different educational system, very different needs in order to subsist there. So many places have memorization as a very important piece of their educational system. They can, you know, they can go circles around me because they just are really good at memorizing. Others, like ours, it might be more into analysis. And then you have these standardized tests. I do believe one solution, and we deal with this all the time with the adults as well, is that you need to teach people how to take a test, how to deal with a multiple choice time test. They know the answers, but they have to think about it slowly. They're not able to go fast. So you have to kind of help people to say, skip what you don't know, do what you do know, go back and then guess, because you got a 1/4 chance of getting it right. And they're in shock, you know. What, guess? Yes, because there's test-taking techniques like games, video games that kids grew up with from a young age, that if you can look at it in a different way, that can help. But I do think it's unfair to try to look at one size fits all in terms of what these tests mean, and yet our whole society and funding is all into outcomes. What are the outcomes? I think in terms of assimilation, you know, we are much less foreign born in Lawrence now than we used to be. We really peaked in 1910. We had 48% foreign born in 1910. Now we only have 36%, so it's a lot less. How are we assimilating? I think we are doing it as we always have. And if you read some of, you know, it was fascinating, wasn't it, that we just had the Bread and Roses strike anniversary, and I read a lot of the books on that, and the different ethnic groups and how strong they were, and the interactions or lack of interactions that were happening at that time. So we really have less foreign born, a lot less foreign born than we used to in Lawrence right now. Those are the two things that the employers, that's another issue. I'm going to pass on that one just now.
I'll take that one. You know, I do think employers have a very big role to play. You know, as part of this Working Cities effort that we're involved in, we went, and there's a number of employers who are engaged with us on it, but we went out and visited one that we'd like to get more engaged with called the GEM Group, which is out in the industrial park. And they employ a quite large Lawrence workforce. And what's interesting about them is that part of their entire ethic as a company, and they deliberately chose Lawrence as a place to site their company and to come, is that they have completely and fully committed to a bilingual floor in their packing and manufacturing plants, not manufacturing, but sort of packing and distribution plant, bilingual supervisors, bilingual processes and procedures everywhere. And they actively encourage this ethic of sort of participation and improvement and questioning by their employees, so that in whatever language they're comfortable in, the employees can contribute to changing the culture or the work process on the floor there. And what was also interesting is that they were one of the few employers that we talked to that weren't bemoaning the lack of soft skills or English skills or whatever in the population that they had. They were extremely happy with their Lawrence workforce and viewed it as a great asset, and felt and it was part of their culture to kind of train and onboard people in the way that they needed for their company to function. I think New Balance is another amazing example of this. They have a very large Lawrence workforce that is incredibly stable as well. And they will brag about their Lawrence employees to, you know, everyone who comes in to their factory. So I think that there are some employers that we have that could actually set a tone for other employers who are in the city and who are coming to the city, and who can learn to understand the population that we have as an asset, and learn how to partner with community-based organizations and the school system in order to build in some of the preparation that people might need in some of those places. So I think that there's a very strong role for employers in all of this. But the one other thing I wanted to say about your question, Mark, is that I really think that comment, it's about changing the story in Lawrence, right? It's about every single one of us in this room going out there and talking, whenever we talk to other people, and telling a different story about this city. You know, in some other place that I was speaking, I quoted the words, there's a Vietnamese writer and activist, her name is Trinh Minh Ha, and she was a Vietnamese immigrant to this country, and she's talking about the experience of people who have either emigrated or been forcibly relocated or whatever it is. And one of the things she says is that there's always going to be other people who are saying things about you. There's always going to be stories out there that are saying what the story of your life and your city is. And if you don't use your voice in contrast to that and speak up and tell a different story, then you will be said by somebody else. And I've always thought that that was one of the most powerful things I ever read in college. And I feel like that's our charge, is to use our voices and to teach our children to use their voices and to say our story of Lawrence and to get that out there. Stop being said by everyone else. We need to say it.
Well, I think that was a great ender. So thank you all so very much for coming. I really think that the amount of people here signifies just how important and how timely this topic is. We'll return for the reception, but before we do, we just have two quick announcements. First, Susan from the Lawrence History Center. Yeah, sure.
And there's plenty of food too, so stay.
Stay for the food.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Susan Gradsky. I'm the director of the Lawrence History Center. We're so pleased to hear this conversation tonight. I think with every point that everyone spoke, I know I had something to say, a reaction, something to add. I'm here to promote our all-day symposium on the new immigration into Lawrence and other similar communities. April 5th, all day. Pre-registration is needed. We have flyers going around. This event was meant to be a preview of that day, or at least that's how I saw it, and it was very much that. So if you like what you heard today, if there were topics that got your mind and your heart stirring, come back on Saturday. You'll hear all of these topics and more fleshed out. As Archon said, while we talk about how unique this community of Lawrence is, and it is, it's also important to put the city on a regional, national level and perspective as well, and we're going to try to do that on Saturday as well. Lawrence is unique. It's a cross-section of every national and international issue you're going to speak about, you're going to hear about in the news. Come back, talk with us, have a dialogue. This was just a fantastic preview, as I'm saying, so I thank the Ash Center, LCW, the City of Lawrence and University for hosting and for allowing us to be part of this and to have this moment to promote. So that's all. Thank you.